Let's show them what we got. Hey guys, what's up? It's the Big A Akasan, and coming to you here with kind of an honest reaction and honest review of the Avengers, the Age of Ultron. Now, this is going to be my first time really doing something this elaborate. Normally, I just tell you how the movie is from my bed the next morning, but I've had some time to think about it, and obviously, this movie is probably going to be the most anticipated movie for the last year or 2 years or so, and I think it's going to be that way for quite a while until Civil War comes out, or of course Batman vs. Superman. Now, this is my first time doing this kind of review, so please let me know if you like it. On top of that, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about just kind of reiterating some of the same points I made on my non-spoiler video that you might have checked out when I was actually in Korea, like an hour after I saw the movie. But we're going to be divulging into spoilers. So with that being said, obviously if you have not seen the movie, you shouldn't be watching this or reading the comments below. At this point, if you haven't seen the movie, you shouldn't be online. You shouldn't be reading. You shouldn't, yeah, go see the movie, basically, if you're that interested. So, let's get into the Age of Ultron. So as some of you might know, I actually do live in Japan. I don't live in America at this moment in time, and I've been living here in Japan for about 4 to 5 years now. The only problem about that, one of the bigger problems about that, is the fact that American movies, all the Hollywood movies, come out extremely delayed. So that being said, The Age of Ultron is coming out in July in Japan. Yes, that's right, July. Alright, so that being said, I obviously couldn't sit here and do a review or sit and wait for July, especially the internet presence that I have for my channel. So I just jumped on a boat and went to Korea, and I saw it in probably the most amazing experience, and I want to tell you a little bit about that right now. The first time I saw The Age of Ultron, I saw it in IMAX with a bit of 4DX, just a bit of 4DX. Now what 4DX is, as you can imagine, fourth dimension experience. They have all the different things. They have the smell, rumble seats. It's like basically going to Disneyland on those like Star Tours or Captain EO or Honey, I Shrunk the Audience. That kind of experience. Smell, wind, water, sound. Every time a bullet went by, you would hear it. Now, the version I saw was the IMAX with a little bit, just a little bit of 4DX, so it wasn't the full-fledged experience, and that one was great. For me personally, I'm not a big fan of IMAX in 3D because something about that gives me a headache afterwards, and especially if you're on the wrong kind of side, if you're too far out, especially with action scenes. So personally, if you're not front and center and a little bit further in the back, for me, I can't deal with IMAX in 3D. It's probably either one or the other that I could deal with, and but especially with action scenes, IMAX does not work so well in 3D. Things start to get a little too blurry for me, and the opening sequence of the Avengers really showed me that. I had quite the headache afterwards, though. The second experience after that was all the way 4DX, and it was quite an amazing experience to have all that situation. I've seen Pacific Rim in 4DX. I saw Interstellar in 4DX, which was a waste of money for the 4DX experience. I've seen a few other things. The next movie I do want to see, Sky Mission, or in English you call it Fast 7, or Furious 7, or Fast and Furious 7, basically the latest movie that came out, right? So, I'm probably going to just bring this up, the 4DX experience, when talking about the certain scenes of the movie, because that's going to really give you a better idea of how that worked basically. For example, when the smell was very unique when they went to the safe house, and like first time I saw it in IMAX with a little bit of 4DX, I kept on thinking somebody's perfume was really strong or somebody came in, but then I remembered I'm in Korea and nobody wears outlandish perfume. And then the second time around watching the movie, I realized that was supposed to be like the smell of flowers or fresh cut grass or something, and then I started to get used to that. When I saw Attack on Titan, Shingeki no Kyojin, the smelled like rotten meat and blood. It was very crazy. So, that's the 4DX experience. I'll make sure to bring that up to you a few more times when I talk about the different points of the movie that I liked or disliked.
Oh, please be my guest.
So let me go ahead and talk about the things that I really enjoyed a lot. And that's the fact that I mentioned this before in my non-spoiler review, but one of the main reasons I loved the Avengers so much, and I thought about this before seeing the Avengers 2, was the fact that this was the first time all of them were getting together. Every time you saw a scene where you're like, oh man, Iron Man's about to meet Thor, oh, Captain America said, oh, they're making little quotes that we know because it's all from the previous movies. And it was worlds colliding. And quite like the Flash and Arrow crossover, that's exactly what we loved about it, was the fact that the worlds were colliding. And it was a superpowered team-up. It's a team-up movie, just like the CW thing was a team-up show. And that's what made the Avengers so special, the first movie. So obviously, going into the Age of Ultron, you gotta eliminate that fascination and realize that you're not going to get this, because this is going to be the next couple times they were meeting or so, or second time, third time, who knows exactly, but they're all fairly well established with each other. And actually, I thought that was handled really well in this movie, and the fact that this was exactly the team-up movie you were looking for, basically. This was exactly, from the opening sequence, specifically the opening sequence, you saw that they weren't messing around anymore. They were very well coordinated the entire time, and they were just taking people out, and people actually, the villains actually feared them. Very much so that when the bad guys in early on, the Hydra people, someone said something to somebody, I forgot the names or whatever, but I know he's a popular, he was kind of an important character or striker or something like that. But Striver, right? And he was like, take him out. But the guy was like, but sir, it's the Avengers. And that kind of solidified the fact that they're well established already, and there's someone to be feared, or they're an adversary that needs to be handled, or you either run away. And that's basically what that opening sequence, why it was so important, to show how well established they all were. Working with each other, knowing each other's strengths. The whole thing with the hammer and Captain America's shield lining up, knocking them out. This thing I thought was, like, my jaw dropped from the moment that opening sequence happened. But there was also kind of a problem about that I'm going to get into a little bit later. On top of the opening scene of the Avengers, it was also one of the last team scenes that I thought was almost, if anything, superior to that infamous scene we saw in the Avengers after the Hulk punches the Chitauri whale or whatever that thing is. And they do that we all know the infamous shot by now, right? Spinning around doing this. Everybody loved that shot so well, but I thought that they actually kind of had a little nice nod to it toward the end of this second movie, but they just hyped it up even more. And I thought that scene was actually very well good. You're gonna be able to watch that. That's actually somewhat of a Blu-ray special. I can imagine how often I'm probably gonna go back and watch that scene to see how well choreographed it was and how timed out it was. It was very Very well done. And I know that was actually one of Joss Whedon's favorite scenes to do or something like that, to see them all up there really kicking ass. And again, going back to the beginning of that opening scene, just showing how kind of well balanced they were and how they kind of all understood each other's powers and space, so to speak. Another big plus about this particular movie was they were able to really give a lot of backstory and kind of flesh out more of the characters that aren't going to be able to have their own movie. For example, you know, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, they're all going on and they're all going to continue to have their own solo movies. But this time around, we got to see a little bit more about Black Widow and Hawkeye, two that were, because for the most part, kind of ignored the first movie. But this time it really got a chance to explain more about them, and just the spin, the kind of the little twist with Hawkeye and having a family and everything was actually pretty good. It sometimes felt a little forced, and I'm going to get into that one a little bit later. But I did like that it didn't drag the movie down so much. It didn't drag it to the point where it was like, oh my God, this is entirely a Hawkeye movie. It helped where it needed to be helped, basically, where the movie didn't get too slow and it didn't seem too one-sided for Hawkeye. It kind of helped things out, and also sort of helped develop things in terms of a prelude for Civil War between Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. The focus on Black Widow in this movie was extremely important, because one of the things that we kind of were complaining about a few weeks ago with the issue of Chris Evans and Jeremy Renner calling the Black Widow character a slut and a hoe, basically it was kind of more a little established a little bit better after seeing the Age of Ultron and realizing that just Black Widow, if anything, wasn't actually serious so much about Captain America or Hawkeye. And actually, in fact, Hawkeye and Black Widow just already had this established understanding that Hawkeye had this secret family. If you go back and you watch that movie a few times, Black Widow knows. She knows very well there's kind of like a secret family on the side or whatever. So it really made this relationship between her and Bruce Banner even more enjoyable. And I didn't think that it was as forced or strange as it seemed in the trailers. It actually really helped both Hulk and Black Widow. I really liked the way that was going, and who knows what's going to happen to the Hulk. If we're gonna get Planet Hulk, well, that all depends, or where it's going, but I really felt this is the best thing that they could do for the Bruce Banner Hulk story at this moment in time. Besides giving some more story to the smaller Avengers, I even thought it was clever the way they were even able to include some of the more supporting characters of the Avengers story. At this moment in time, a lot of them weren't actually Avengers, but they're sort of in the story and very important to just the development of the overall Marvel universe. I thought that it was very clever the way they had Maria Hill still within the world of the Marvel world, working with the Avengers, still working for S.H.I.E.L.D. on the side, or undercover, or whatever the case may be, but she was very still part of the story, which I really liked. And some of the even minor details of after the Ultron first made his appearance and glass is breaking everywhere, you actually see the time Joss Whedon took to show her picking the glass out of her feet and just having a conversation. I thought these little things were very important to me, and I really appreciated that they didn't just have characters standing around. They still had them little concentrated bits that go a long way. More importantly, we even had the Falcon, forgot his whatever his name is though, but the guy who plays Falcon, or the character who's playing Falcon, they have him mentioning some of the events of what's going on or what went on in the Winter Soldier. And I like how they threw a lot of the elements of the Winter Soldier, Hydra, the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. A lot of those little things were thrown in there by the Falcon character, reminding Steve that there is kind of a more minor threat a more underground threat that they still need to be able to take care of. While Chris Evans or Captain America, Steve Rogers, is busy handling the bigger monster threats, he's got his buddy there handling the more subdued street level threats that we'll see a lot more, I'm sure, play out in Captain America 3. But of all the supporting characters that are helping this Avengers world, this Marvel world, no one was better than the character of Rhodey here, War Machine. He lit this movie up, and when I say that, he really helped move this movie along in the terms of the humor and the humanity of it all being funny, not snarky Tony Stark funny, but just very like, okay, that's my guy right there. That from the beginning with that story of him hanging out with Thor and talking with Tony Stark, just trying to impress them with the whole tank and throwing it down. You looking for this? That was just, it was really funny. The whole facial expression that he made, telling that story, the self-approval he was giving himself, telling it to someone else, the normal crowd. But if there's any sort of supporting character in this Marvel universe, in this Avengers world, it has to be the character of Rhodey, War Machine. By far, he made this movie, and when I say that, it was his character, his humor that was always there in Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3, but this one really helped just make the world of superheroes still human. Falcon is definitely there, and he, like I said, he handles the street level, but War Machine is kind of right in between there, dealing with these gods and monsters. But you can see in that story that he was telling Tony Stark and Thor that he's definitely not in the big leagues, and he's definitely dealing with a very minor league there. Still better than street level, but he's still dealing with a minor league of bad guys. And that whole story of him throwing the tank down, you looking for this? And no response from Tony Stark and Thor, just for me really made this movie in the fact that he tells it later to just a normal crowd and it kills them, and that self sort of solidification and that self gratifying face that he had really sold the movie. And what I think is actually going to make this one, Avengers Age of Ultron, probably one of the top Marvel movies. These little things really help move the movie along and really make it one of the classic Marvel movies. You know, one of the things we often hear about the Marvel world and the Marvel movies is that there's too many jokes. There's like too many jokes in the Marvel movies. It's too funny, so to speak. But I think that's exactly where Rhodey came in handy, is the fact that his jokes weren't over the top, but they helped ground us and bring us into a world of like, okay, this is pretty funny. And that's very evident when War Machine is still out there. He's trying to play in the major leagues here, and he's like, yeah, this is gonna be a great story. And then you see Vision just come around, tearing people up with his phasing thing, and phasing through, tearing up the robots, and Rhodey's just like, okay. Okay, what? It was great, but definitely he made that movie to me.
Are you even pulling? Are you on my team? Just represent, pull. All right, let's go.
Though what I will say is that I hope by the next Iron Man movie or Civil War or whatever the case may be, we do see War Machine, the actual outfit, take a little more of an upgrade. I'd like to see that. And in fact, just a very minor nitpick is the fact that we never really saw a big focus on the War Machine outfit in the Age of Ultron. We always knew it was War Machine, but seeing that in 3D, we really didn't see much detail there. A little bit of Iron Man and War Machine fighting together, which I thought that was great, but definitely I'd like to see the War Machine 2.0 in time. And finally, one of my biggest highlights of the Age of Ultron movie would definitely be the stroke of genius, perhaps, by Joss Whedon with what we saw in the living room scene, just hanging out in the lifting of Mjolnir. We saw it in the trailer. We saw that that's what's going to happen. They're going to be hanging out, and we just kind of took it for what it was. We never knew that it was going to actually be very important for the introduction of Vision, and in fact, not waste all this overzealous time explaining the Vision character and really getting them to prove himself, because I did feel that was a little bit awkward having this brand new character show up way past the halfway mark of the movie. But I thought that was a great way to actually say, okay, he's a good guy. Okay, we can trust him. I thought him lifting Mjolnir was absolutely a great little thing, and maybe the highest point of the entire movie, especially if you weren't spoiled. But it all started in the beginning with the sort of explanation of who is worthy holding Mjolnir in the beginning. We never really thought about it that much until after that point, and it was a great scene because you never saw it coming. That's what was the best part. It's all in the swing.
It's all in the swing.
Some of the best 4DX effects were definitely in that opening scene where Thor would come crashing down with Mjolnir. The lighting would just strike, my seat would rumble. At one point in the movie, there's one of the Ultron bots that come crashing into a living room or something, half of a body, and he starts skirting down the floor, right? They had this one little thing at the bottom of your seat that grabs your legs, and it scared everybody in the theater. It was a very small thing in the movie if you saw it regular, but if you saw it in 4DX, you were like, God damn! Like, it was great scene right there. As I mentioned earlier, the smell vision was crazy, like someone sprayed Febreze everywhere. Every time they arrived at the safe house, or they saw a scene at the safe house, I thought that was great. It was really good. The movements of the actual 4DX chair, now where they've been more dominant in other movies, you couldn't really get all of that, in a fighting movie. But it was very evident when Black Widow was getting dropped from the jet and going through the streets of Korea. It was amazing. I loved it. It really was good. I've always been sort of mixed on the wind jets in the 4DX theater during certain scenes, because by the time the actual wind hits you, sometimes the scenes are past. This was very evident during the fight, I guess, in Africa or so, where you saw Iron Man chasing Ultron around the boats and outside flying around, but then they would have to cut back into the fighting scenes inside. Every time they showed, you heard the wind jets picking up, but by the time I actually got blown or something with the wind, that we were back inside. So I don't know how that would work in the future if you did it earlier with the 4DX wind jets, but then sometimes the problem with that, if you hear the wind jets coming early before you get to that scene, then you're already kind of ruined because you know something's about to happen soon. So that's a tricky situation, but it was a very minor situation. I will say that I was a little more impressed with the 3D element in IMAX the first time with the Avengers, the first Avengers a few years back. Maybe it was just the seating, maybe it was just the boat lag or so, being tired from going to another country, getting right off the boat and going directly to the movie theater. But I just sometimes felt that Disney did a better job in just the production of the 3D, or had more allowances for really interesting 3D in the first movie. 2 points, in fact, was when Thor hits Iron Man in the first movie, you really saw the 3D come out very strongly. And then the other scene where Iron Man is fighting or doing something, a few times he's using the laser on his forearm to open up the shield, the helicarrier or something like that, or he was fighting the monster or something like that. You guys know what I'm talking about? You really felt this. You really felt the laser go into your peripheral vision. In the second movie, The Age of Ultron, the 3D was great with the Ultron and Jarvis comparison on the screen. I thought that was great. Introduced that on top of that with the 4DX lighting when Ultron was attacking Jarvis, and that worked out really well. Some scenes worked out really well, but it was never like in your face, like, boom, this was really great 3D. And that part was a little disappointing in some sense, because I thought they could have gone a little bit more with that and have some scenes, but it's quite all right. Of all the shots that I enjoyed the most, definitely I love the sort of scene with the Avengers mansion, everything coming in, our Avengers tower, I'm sorry. Just that scene of showing the sort of Iron Man, the white Centurion team coming back in, flying in. You see Bruce Banner, you see Tony Stark going to his lab, and you see Thor just kind of standing by the window brooding, so to speak. That was a great scene that just reminded me about why we like the Avengers so much in every sort of version. The comic, the animation, the movie. This was the Avengers, whether they're in the Avengers Mansion, Avengers Tower. This was the team right there. I definitely think that Steve Rogers, Captain America, just Chris Evans in general really stepped up in this game, and you really can see him going toe-to-toe at this point with Robert Downey Jr. I think this part is going to be very interesting come Civil War, because we already saw so many scenes of this in the Age of Ultron that they're already sort of butting heads. And I'm really liking this, how it's going to come to a point in Civil War. I just hope it doesn't overshadow what the Avengers movies are all about. And the Captain America 3 movie might even be more interesting than Avengers 2. It might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing, but I would certainly like to, when Avengers 3 comes out and we have the Infinity War, Crusade or whatever, part 1, I don't want Civil War to be better than Avengers 3. Could you imagine? But it might just happen, especially with Spider-Man. Who knows? So now let me go ahead and move on to some of the things I kind of had maybe a little bit of a problem with, or I just straight did not like, nitpicks, so to speak, or just straight hated it.
All right.
And the first major one that comes to mind is indeed Ultron. The Ultron character, there was just something about him that I didn't really like. The design particularly. I did not really like the way he graduated from shards of the Iron Man, Centurion, whatever that squad was. I really liked that look. I thought that was a very menacing look. And then somehow from that point with the vibranium, right? Moving on, the new body he had ended up looking somewhat like a Disney character. I don't know exactly what it was where they went wrong, because I'm all about going ahead and reinventing things, changing things, but just, you know, even these kind of pictures, what we're seeing here, I didn't see this type of bad guy most of the movie. I didn't see someone like cold. I didn't see like the standard AI, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but what I saw was so much facial expressions in that Ultron, upgraded Ultron face, and even later in the movie when he went on to a whole nother body, I just thought it was a little overdone, actually. He really reminded me of a Disney character, kind of like Jafar. Even when he was explaining sort of his story to Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, I thought these things were really a little too much sometimes. I understand, after some time I thought about it, and especially the second time I watched it, I realized that this isn't the 616 Ultron. It's not the Ultron that I probably am the most familiar with, especially Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the anime there. But it was definitely, I know that there's an Ultimate Ultron out there as well. There are very many different versions, and I know that part of that character of Ultron is due in part to the fact that that's part Tony Stark in that persona. It's like a dark Tony Stark, and that's even more evident if you're reading Superior Iron Man right now. That's actually written by Tom Taylor. There's a very much kind of like an evil Stark in Ultron, and I I was fine with that. I noticed that he had a lot of daddy complexes, and some things were quite entertaining, but you could never take him seriously as a viable villain. I knew he was confused. Scarlet Witch explained that he was confused, that he didn't really know what he wanted, and he was lashing out and he was angry. I just felt that they sometimes doing that, and all the jokes that Ultron was making, it didn't really seem like a huge threat most of the time. It was very weird, and I think that's one of the biggest problems Marvel has, is that they make all their every character entertaining and sometimes maybe too funny, and by that sense they are lacking proper villains to really go the distance. And one of their best villains that they had, Loki, ended up being somewhat of an anti-hero at times in the Dark World. So I certainly hope that in the future, and especially with Thanos getting closer and closer, we aren't going to have that problem, because I would be definitely devastated if Thanos ends up becoming along that same line as every other Marvel villain that has shown up on the screen. And this one is more of a nitpick, but only because we saw it in the trailer, but I always felt that it was a little strange to see this evolution of Ultron from the busted up bodies moving into this jacked up version. We never really saw that bath or metal bath or whatever he was doing in those trailers take shape to show him growing into that new body or so. It was kind of more or less left to our expectations, our assumptions, but I did notice a few people in the movie theater actually not knowing that was Ultron, which is rightfully so, but not knowing that was Ultron in the church talking to the twins, because the last time we saw him, he was transferring himself, and you really, for a lot of people, they couldn't understand that he actually had a new body. A few people actually asked me, is that Ultron? We knew by his voice, but we just weren't really 100% clear, and it would have been good to had shown maybe a little bit more of that. Maybe it would have dragged down the movie, but we're about to get into that. The opening of the Avengers Age of Ultron was amazing. It was so much action. It showed them as a team. But what exactly happened and how did they get there? That's something that was missing big time. If you go back, way back to the Avengers, the first one, you remember the ending scene was so touching. The music showing everybody caring and the Avengers basically being a solid thing, and then everybody was going their separate ways. One of the problems with this second movie was the fact that we never actually saw them come back. We never actually saw them assemble again. We just, suddenly they just were a team again and fighting Hydra. But why were they doing this? We just kind of got thrown into this battle. And I felt like there should have been some sort of explanation for that, especially given the fact that if you don't follow the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and if you don't follow any of the other movies, and if you just went from Avengers 1 to Avengers 2, it just seems sort of weird because everybody kind of disappeared and then they came back. But why did they come back? Why did they do it? Now, the only problem about that is it might have slowed down the movie. But therein lies some of the problem. If they had gone ahead and gave some sort of backstory to why the Avengers got all back together, it wouldn't have had that same opening fascination of that opening battle. It would have been a very different pacing to the movie. So I understand what happened, but I'm hoping there's going to be some sort of filler comic or something to just sort of fill in those little blanks. Especially given the fact that now that S.H.I.E.L.D. was dissolved in some form or fashion, who exactly assembled the Avengers again? Who had all the contact information? Who knew how to basically put the team back together? Claw, Professor Claw, Caesar, Andy Serkis, whatever his name is. I liked that character. I thought they did very well. I was so interested to see more of him, and I don't know if this was intentional or if it's because Spider-Man came to the MCU and they're gonna have to cut some time down or whatever the case may be, but I wanted to see more of him. I thought he was gonna be in the movie, maybe a little bit more. I thought the whole vibranium thing was going to be a little more dominant in the movie, but I understand we have Black Panther coming up, but I just would have had liked to see him a little bit more than just that cameo. And these sort of issues sort of made this Avengers movie seem like less of a movie and more of an episode. They might be going for the Harry Potter franchise route, which might be fine because it's working out for them in the Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2. They might be going for these more episodic type of movies instead of like a full contained feature. But sometimes it's these little problems, especially the way the Marvel world is built. It's not like Harry Potter, which is just going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's 1, 2, now side feature, side feature, side feature, side feature, and it's branching out. So sometimes just the Avengers movies themselves, if they're going to have this like episodic feel to them, you're always going to feel like something is missing. Just like the Marvel comic events that happen, the major comic events. If you're only reading the main story, you're missing out when the side stories, if you're not collecting the side stories. But sometimes the side stories are such shit, or the art is such shit, that it just makes the entire event kind of like that. So they got to be very careful about that, because if they keep on putting these really interesting characters like Claw in, but they're really gonna only have them in there for a bit and branch them out somewhere else, that could hurt them in the end. They gotta be very careful about that, especially introducing new characters in the main movies, which are for the most part going to be Avengers. The Avengers movies are the main thing. They're gonna have to be very careful about that. It's a very curious Marvel world we live in right now. And of all nitpicks here, it's the Vision. The Vision, I didn't have much of a problem. It was hard for me to adjust to him the first time I saw the movie. I thought it was kind of weird having him in the movie to begin with and having the Infinity Stone in his head, things like this. But I got over it, but it's the one thing that kind of bothered me was just the inclusion of the yellow cape. I'm not against him having a yellow cape. I just don't understand why he needed to make a yellow cape. It had no reason or accountability for that scene to just suddenly grow out a yellow cape. And I felt this is a very small nitpick, but I feel like everything should have some reason for happening, and if Ultron is going to change his body for whatever reason, then why did the Vision decide to grow a cape? This was very strange. So I felt as corny as it might be, or whatever, if the Avengers were having a party earlier in the movie, maybe they should have used yellow drapes or something. Maybe across the street there should have been some sort of humanitarian fair or some sort of World Peace Council or something with yellow curtains draping the building or something to symbolize peace. So when the Vision is out there standing by the window and staring at the world that he's deciding to protect, he gets the inspiration from those curtains or drapes or whatever to grow that yellow cape. It's a small thing, but I just thought it was very strange. Why did he need to make a yellow cape? And lastly, not that I disliked it or not that I loved it either, but let's talk about the big elephant in the room here. Quicksilver. Quicksilver's death. What could we say about that? Was that a good call or was it a bad call? That's the real question I'm still debating on. Let's just think about this from one point or another. We saw Quicksilver here in Days of Future and Past, and we saw him come in and he stole the show. He stole the entire movie, but it was only for a very quick, brief moment we saw a little bit of Quicksilver, and it was a very practical shot. There was a huge shot, and then everything else was very practical. Now, on to the Age of Ultron, we see a Quicksilver. It is Quicksilver, and we see his powers, but done very differently and very strangely at some times. Sometimes he was running backwards for some reason. But I did like what they did with him, but I also could see that being a problem in the near future. How many speedsters are we really going to have? And in the near future, not just the fact that we have Days of Future and Past, or the Fox version of Quicksilver. Then we're on the other world of superheroes. We're gonna have we already have a Flash TV show, and then we're gonna have a Flash movie version of Flash. I could see this getting kind of strange to have so many speedsters or people that can run fast. So I'm not saying that's an excuse, but I could also see the comparison people would be making, and I don't know if it served the purpose so much of Quicksilver getting etched off like that. But who knows? Who knows if Agent Coulson was able to come back, and especially since Joss Whedon is gone from the projects, who knows, especially with as powerful as they can really make the Scarlet Witch, and as powerful as she has been in the comics, wiping out almost 98% of mutants on Earth. Who knows what she could do with those powers? They didn't explore it enough. They didn't explore it a lot, but there could be a lot of things they can do in the future, and especially where Thor is going with Ragnarok, especially with the Infinity Gems, the Time Gem, which I think we have yet to see the Time Gem come up. This may not be the last of Quicksilver we see, and I'm kind of banking on that one in terms of we might just see him come back fairly soon, within the next couple of years or so, and then we might see him more improved. But I'm gonna leave that one up to you guys. Definitely, as the question of the video is, what did you think about that? Was it a good thing or a bad thing? Did it help the movie? Did it hurt the movie? I personally didn't have much of a problem with it. Unfortunately got spoiled about it, so it might have been a little more shocking to see more, but I did see kind of a bit of a nerfed or just a kind of whatever person with powers or enhanced. And the whole thing with the mutant thing, they're gonna have a bit of a problem. I could see this down the line, especially having what we know as Magneto's kids, or sometimes he's not, sometimes they aren't. Having this issue, it's gonna be a problem, but I could definitely see Scarlet Witch working in the Avengers world. The Quicksilver, however, might be better served in Fox's world. So I think they made the right call on that. It didn't really serve as shocking for me, or it didn't really change things the way maybe Coulson'S Death might have. But I also had a problem with Coulson'S Death because I didn't think that they needed that to really unite a team. It should have been something more, because, you know, Banner didn't know that Coulson was dead, and he got together with the team. So we'll see. Yeah, that one's up to you guys. What do you think about the Quicksilver thing? Let me know below. All right, guys. So that is it. We are done. The Age of Ultron is finished, and we move on to bigger and grander things about the Marvel Universe. Thanos, the mid-scene credits there was kind of a whatever. I thought they could have done more. The feeling of the fascination of the first movie, Avengers 1, those mid-scene credits were a little bit more interesting, but we all know Thanos is coming, so I suppose it depends what's going to happen next. Okay guys, that's it. If you like what you saw, please subscribe, share, get me out there. My first time doing this type of review. I hope you liked it, and please let me know what you thought of the movie below, and let's keep it going. Alright guys, I am out. Peace. Avengers!
I'm always picking up after you boys.
We can tear them apart. From the inside.